Hello, everybody. My name is Emily Kotecki. I am in Raleigh, North Carolina. So I am having lunch and you are having breakfast, and welcome to this virtual table today, where we will be really diving into digital tools that you can engage your audiences with online. A little bit about me, and then we'll jump right in. So as Dixie said, my background is in museum education, but also journalism. And I went to school at GW, and then I spent several years at the North Carolina Museum of Art, working primarily in distance learning for about 2/3 of the time, developing and launching new virtual learning programs, virtual field trips, online courses, blended, flipped. We did it all, and then went into interpretation, in-gallery interpretation with digital interactives, mobile apps, hands-on activities, artist talks, things like that. And for the last 2.5 years, I've been a consultant to museums in those two areas, and adding on, kind of pulling from journalism, my podcasting. So now I consult with museums about online learning, especially in the midst of the pandemic. That became a huge focus. And then also podcasting, that I have my own podcast and I host one for the Microsoft Libraries and Museums Division. So I am super excited to be here today to share a lot of best practices around online tools to engage audiences. And I'm just going to jump right in without further ado. I did see in Whova that there are some questions already pending. And what I'm going to try to do is incorporate and try to answer those questions as we go through, because some of those questions I'm touching on later in the presentation. But as you ask questions, feel free to put them in the chat on Zoom. That's where I'm tuning in from. And I will also check back to Whova, and I think Dixie will help me kind of make sure I'm getting to all the questions that are popping up. So we will address questions throughout. This is going to be an interactive presentation and with participation from you in discussion. So we're just going to jump right in. And thank you everyone for introducing yourselves in the chat. It's really great to see where you all are from all over Alaska. I was there in high school, and as you all know, it's a really incredibly beautiful state. So I am honored just to be here virtually. Okay. Can everyone see this? Thank you. I'm looking at Dixie because that's who I can see. So just let it load so it becomes full screen. This is our topic for today. This is what we're going to do today. We're going to look at goals of digital tools, some do's and don'ts, looking at why we use them, thinking about our audiences. We're going to be using Jamboard, and I'll walk you through that if you haven't used it before. It's basically a collaborative sticky note platform that we'll use together today to spark discussion and provide some reflection. We will look at different types of digital tools, strengths, limitations, best case uses, scenarios in which to use them. We'll kind of reflect on that again together. We'll look at best practices, and then we'll go into thinking about your own audiences of who you're interacting with and who are you creating these tools for, how might they use them, and what do you have to keep in mind as you develop them. There'll be time at the end for lots of Q&A and throughout. So given that, okay, let me just make sure. Okay, goals for just sometimes it skips ahead. So the goals for today are to expand our knowledge of low-cost digital tools to use with audiences, that they do not have to be expensive. There are a lot of wonderful low-cost free tools that are out there that you can use. We'll explore the strengths and limitations of these different tools and identify which tool best supports your program goals. And then at the end, create an action step for you to think about what is the next thing that you can do after this workshop to begin that journey with this new digital tool, or maybe one that you're familiar with. I just worry that this topic. Okay, digital tools does not mean that you have to be tech savvy, that you have to pay a lot, that you have to use a lot of tools. You don't want to spread yourself too thin. And it does not mean that you use tech just to use it. We're going to get later to think about our audience considerations and how and why we would use it. But we don't want to use tech for tech's sake, because then it's a tool to achieve an end. It is not the end in itself. Using digital tools does mean that you can find alignment with the goals of your program. So the tool can support what you want the program to do. It does mean that you can develop an understanding of what your audience may already be familiar with or using. So it gives you a sense of where it increases your knowledge and awareness of the audiences that you're working with. What are they using? That can be a place where you can meet them so that you're not having to start from scratch or bring them somewhere else where they're not comfortable with. And it's an opportunity for new forms of engagement before, during, and after virtual experiences. I'm sure many of you have experienced a visitor, especially over the course of the pandemic, has changed. It does not just mean a physical visitor, but it's a digital visitor. So how are they interacting with your resources? Where are those visitors looking? What do they want from your institution? And so thinking about how do we engage these digital visitors that will be coming to your museum. In thinking about using digital tools, it's nice to almost kind of put out the barriers up front. Why don't we do this? One is we're not sure where to start when it comes to how do I engage students? How do I engage families? How do I continue to provide professional development for teachers? Or just my general audience. I have a general audience, let's say, that is maybe not so comfortable with technological tools. So how do I engage that? There's a perception that the tools are too expensive. If I do a video, I got to get a camera crew and that's expensive and I got to edit it and that's a lot of my time. So there's expensive in terms of actual cost and then cost of your time, which I kind of break down and kind of looking at the different tools. And maybe just not comfortable or aware of what's out there. There is, before the pandemic, and then obviously again there is like a plethora of tools, and like it can be overwhelming to figure out which one to use. And so today I'm going to also give some specific examples so that you have an idea of, I kind of want to do something collaborative to, and spark that engagement there. Maybe I'll experiment with that tool. Before I continue, maybe in the chat, or I welcome people to just quickly unmute themselves. What are some other barriers that you find that maybe aren't listed here when it comes to wanting to adopt or use digital tools?
For me, probably just the learning curve of knowing that there's something new I would have to figure out how to use and then use.
Yes. And everyone here is already so busy and to add a new tool to your toolkit, it seems like a lot. I totally get that. The ability to edit. So if you're doing any kind of video or audio, that if you create something, you have to edit it. And that's often where a lot of the time is in creating content like that. Barriers about access, being in remote areas of the country or your state. How do you make sure that people can still access either how you can upload it to where you need it to go and how visitors can access it? Unsure whose job it is. Just writing these down so I don't lose them in the chat as it goes on. Learning curve. So I'm hearing staffing. Whose responsibility is it? Learning curve. And we might come back to these maybe when we think about kind of action steps later. Okay, thank you. Understanding how a tool can support the goal of what you're trying to do and just an awareness of what's out there. Okay. So I guess I also want to, with all the questions that are coming in, the concerns about it, is that you're not starting from zero. And the reason I say that is because by participating in professional development experiences like this, by having a community of peers out there through Alaska museums and through your own colleagues, and maybe you've already experimented a little bit. And so I think and maybe also in the past you've used other tools. So you're not starting from zero. And just to give you that confidence that you're starting, even if it's a little bit above zero, you're not at zero because you're here today, you have experience in the past running programs. And so I just want to give you that confidence boost. To start with, though, we're going to use Jamboard, so a tool. So I also want to model some tools. ADA accessibility challenges. So I just saw that come up. We can talk about accessibility when we go into the types of platforms, because that a lot of these platforms address accessibility in some small way. So I think the first question I want to open up with in Jamboard is, how are you approaching the idea that tech can help support engagement with audiences? Basically, why use these digital tools? I think starting with why is a good place to begin, because then it gets away from the idea that you're just going to use it because you think you should use it. So to do this, I'm going to close this. We're going to use Jamboard. It looks like there's 30 people here. So we're going to do 3 breakout groups, giving about 10 people per room. So what I'm going to do is just show you what Jamboard is. Can I get like a emoji raise of hands if you've used Jamboard before? Emoji being going to the bottom of your screen, clicking any kind of, okay, so relatively new. Okay, 1 or 2, okay, that's totally fine. This will be a new tool you can put in your toolbox. So Jamboard is a collaborative sticky note tool. What you do is, I will in a minute share links in the chat. That chat will follow you when I break you into breakout rooms. You add a sticky note here. So on this dashboard here, you can use a pen, you can erase, you have a cursor, you can add a picture, shapes, your own text box, you can, laser point here. I'm not gonna do that. We are gonna make sticky notes. And so each person is gonna add their thoughts through the sticky note. So why use digital tools with audiences? You would write your response here. So why use digital? It can increase interactivity, let's say in a virtual field trip. So this is my note. The little blue line across the bottom tells me how much room I have left. You can change the color if you want, depending on your mood today. And then when you hit save, it pops up onto the board. And you can keep going, you can type more, or you can hit cancel. And once your Post-it note is up, you can move it around, make it bigger or smaller. And if you want to add more, you just keep adding more. When you go into your breakout rooms, I want you to, I guess I'm thinking about, we're going to be using Jamboard throughout the presentation. And at the top, you'll see that you can go to the next frame. So don't go to the next frame yet. You can jump ahead to see what we'll be doing, but we'll be using Jamboard throughout, and I'll show you again how to go to that next slide when we're ready. But for now, I'm going to break you into rooms. I just want you to go and answer this question of why use digital tools. So let me go back here. Pardon the back-end logistics that you're seeing. I might just stop share my screen for a second. Thank you for everyone's patience. Okay, I think off we should go. I think we're all back. Welcome back, everybody. I hope there was some kind of meta reflection on the use of Jamboard as a digital tool. So I hope you got it. We're going to be using it a lot today. So I hope you enjoyed that first entree into it. I'm sorry there were some difficulties getting into the Jamboards. But as I was saying to someone, I see her picture, but I don't see her name. But this is a tool that can be used for really any age audience. I saw my son in kindergarten when he started virtual learning in spring of 2020 use Jamboard. It's a very accessible tool. What's nice about digital tools too, we'll talk a lot about this, but in different ways, they can be this archive of your discussion. So even after like today's session, I can share the links, or Dixie can share the links with you all. You'll have access to them. So if you're thinking back and you're wanting to share what you did today with your colleagues, you can go back and use the links and show that. So it's just a nice archive for you or your audiences to have access to in developing ideas with them. So I want to kind of share what we all did together. Group 1 kind of went right into where we were going to go together. So this is great in terms of grouping it by theme. And I think the themes that came up here, and I almost feel like this is a side note with Jamboard. There's like a personality that comes out in each person's Jamboard. Like I love this group. It's kind of like really enter, like doing like the side angle post-it notes. And then there's sometimes one group I had was just like, they all use yellow post-it notes. So I don't know what the Rorschach test here is, but I just like seeing the group dynamics within Jamboard. But let's start with group one, since they actually reached a lot of some of the themes that I went 3, 2, 1. And when I got to them, they'd done a lot of the work for me. But why use it? It increases interactivity online, and whether that is when you're live with a group or even asynchronously. So synchronously being live, like we are, asynchronous being not live. It can add depth. And I know in one of the other Jamboards, it was kind of digital can provide these deeper connections to resources or materials or objects or assets that you have, that if you're in person, you're maybe kind of limited somehow in some ways. Whereas digital, it provides these layers of engagement. Relevance came up a lot, which I think is, I love the idea of how, what it means to be relevant and how digital tools themselves are relevant, because that's where audiences, it's how a lot of audiences are learning and connecting. But it also relevant, I think, in, where was it? I think it was a group 2 with COVID, as things change, that you can easily move and adapt and remain relevant regardless of, I mean, even if, despite the trauma of going through something like that, but you can remain relevant because you're able to pivot and use digital. I think a lot of the conversations early in the pandemic were that museums that had digital tools to pivot on were pivoting faster because they already had that infrastructure set up. And even if it's setting up a Jamboard, which is, if you have a Google account, you're basically set to set one up, or something bigger like an LMS, you can pivot when you have that kind of digital infrastructure and familiarity in place. So yes, relevance, stay with the times, that no matter what's going on. I think looking at meeting mission, combining like mission while closed, reaching new audiences, that came up a lot too. Expanding reach beyond the walls of the museum. We talked about what it means now to have digital visitors. The digital tools allow you to do that. Accessibility, I think this was approached in 2 ways. I'm kind of, there was access in terms of remote and expanded reach and geographic reach. And then there was access in terms of increased accessibility for people with disabilities who may not physically be able to come to the museum. Or if you're running a Zoom meeting, you can put on captions, right? So that people can follow what's going on. And so there's accessibility features built into a lot of platforms that also enable that expansion into addressing accessibility needs. Marketing and fundraising. I was looking at that. I think, yes, I think when you reach new visitors, you're also, and maybe this is what you're getting at in group 1, feel free to jump in, reaching new potential donors. And people I know in one of the interviews that I did a while ago and talking to someone who was tracking kind of the trends of fundraising and COVID, people are just so grateful for the lecture that they were able to access. They were able to reach someone in Alaska and they're over in Florida. Like that's just that's still kind of, I think, mind blowing to a lot of people that they can do that now. And they just feel so grateful that digital tools also allow you to just pop in a want to donate because you're feeling so grateful kind of moment. And then you can build on that relationship that you're building. I want to pop over here and see, I like this. It's just fun. Digital tools are fun. It makes it goes beyond. I think one of the other groups had like, it just helps alleviate Zoom fatigue. We were all on here for 2 hours. It's gonna be a big day. We're gonna like be rubbing our eyes after this. So mixing it up instead of just having someone talk at you is really helpful. So when we think about why we want to do something, it can help shape which tool we want to use. And so that brings me to the different types of digital tools that are out there. So we're going to jump into that. Before we go into this, anyone have any questions or additional thoughts about why that was really struck you or was interesting to you?
It's not really something I talked about in our session, but I did want to mention it here. A lot of museums, especially larger museums, tend to think everyone has an app, I need an app. But there was one instance where I just was so inspired by it, and it was the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History. they had an exhibit that was super old, but they didn't have the funding and the administration was not going to update it. And it was their skeleton exhibit of animals. So what they ended up doing was saying, okay, how can we update this in a digital way since it's not going to happen physically? And that's why they used the app. They had a problem and digital was the best way to solve it. It wasn't because they wanted to do an app, it's because they had a problem in this app where you could do VR and you put the app over some of the skeletons in the exhibit and it brought them to life. You could see the woodpecker's tongue come out. So it was a virtual way of updating an exhibit that they did not have the funds or the admin want to update that exhibit yet. They used the tool to fix it. So that idea of this is the best tool to fix this problem we have.
Yes, yes. And I think, I remember there's some analogy that like the iPad isn't going to like build the program for you, but the iPad will help support what you're trying to do. So I think to that, there was some better analogy that I'm blanking on. I'll remember it later. But yes, the digital tool is the vehicle. It's the means to an end. It is not the end. And there are all types of digital tools out there. And so this is where we're going to start thinking about what is out there and how do we wrap our head around the learning of it, the whose responsibility of it. And I think there was a question actually before I jump into this in Whova about what are the trends that have changed since March 2020. And I think that in some ways there's an expectation of visitors that there will be some familiarity and use of these tools too. I think there's a lot of questions happening now about sustainability, a lot of the digital programs that have been created. I think that the trends that have changed or that these things exist for visitors anywhere to access museum programs anywhere. What tool? I don't know if there's a trend. I think we're going to talk about some of like the collaborative tools that I think are pretty popular right now being used. But I think what's changed in trend-wise are like the expectations around it. And that because digital can have these affordances of interactivity, that, you know, if I'm going to join something live, I want it to be something that's not just a recorded video. I want something interactive where I'm engaged, that I'm being asked questions, that I can ask questions back, that it's interactive. So I think maybe that's part of it. And I want to come back to that too. But so digital tools. These are going to be kind of the breakdown, but I want to address like accessibility within this too, since that's come up a lot. And also the idea of kind of access and geographic reach, especially into rural remote areas. With video, we can think about using it almost anywhere before, and I'm kind of pinning it to this idea of a virtual, there's some kind of maybe virtual field trip or happening, but that these tools can be used before they interact with you live, during, we'll get down to that in a second, and after. And why I say during is because if you're having a field trip or even a lecture and you have maybe 30 minutes, whatever video you're showing really needs to support and show something that you cannot do on your own. It has to be supplemental is what I mean. You just don't want your lecture to then be you showing a video of someone else talking, if that makes sense, because that won't engage the visitors are there maybe to hear you talk. But if you're trying to, let's say you're talking about a painter and you want to demo a process video, usually those kind of videos can be used before or after, because then that can spark conversation in the live event. So you're trying to think about when you use video, what is that video doing? What is it showing? And how is it supporting the learning goals that you're trying to achieve? If you have a short time with your audience, what do you want that interaction to be like? And what tool do you need to use during that time to elevate that? Like I said, here, a video can be used to demonstrate a process. It can be an interview with someone in your staff. It can be an interview with a content expert. Maybe that's also what's changed, is that you can now record a Zoom video with almost anybody, and you can get them on Zoom for like 5 minutes, record it, and you've got something that you actually may not even need to edit, to that earlier question. It can illustrate or animate an ideas. It can be a story time, and that can be something that you record and then post, and you don't have to worry about it again. It explores something that you cannot share just by talking. And And that's what I mean in terms of thinking about how to use it during. I just haven't, you can use it. I just haven't seen it used a lot during, because there's other ways to interact with the visitor during that time you have together. You could, but maybe you should do a quick 1 minute, clip of talking to a scientist or historian or artist, and then you talk about it afterwards. But you want to minimize how much video you're using since you're already on video. So that's one way. In terms of the platform that you could use, obviously there's Vimeo and YouTube. If you're working with schools, be careful about access on YouTube. A lot of schools don't allow access to YouTube. However, you can also always upload it to your website, and that can be, if you can natively embed it there, then it can be usually accessible by schools. And to create an account on Vimeo or YouTube is free. The cost of your time is where it really varies widely when it comes to creating video as a tool for engagement. As I said, you can do, it varies from, let's record a 5-minute interview on Zoom with my curator, and I've got 3 questions, and we're just going to record it. It's going to be 5 minutes, and we'll put that up. Or it could be you have an opportunity to do a full lighting and film crew kind of shoot, and you make a series of videos. But that time to plan it and schedule it and coordinate it, that would just be more on your time. So we're going to get into best practices later, but this is kind of the overview. And an example I have here is the National Portrait Gallery. They have these 5-minute kind of artist intro videos, and they have them living asynchronously actually on YouTube, that people can access, and introduces them to an artist and gives them some discussion questions. And then they can use that to jump into, okay, before I meet with these students, I want you all to watch this video, and then together we'll talk about what you saw. We'll talk about her art. We'll talk about what kind of art making activity you might be doing in your classroom after this. And so video is a very versatile way of using media and bringing in also outside voices. Audio examples might be demonstrating sound effects, podcasts, interviews, etc. This could also be used before, during, or after. And what's nice about once you create, let's say, a video or audio piece, it can just live there on your website for other people to access too, usually by creating a digital content piece. For one audience, other audiences might also enjoy access to it. So if you put it into a place where other audiences can access it, it can be helpful. Creating the cost of the platform can be pretty low. You have SoundCloud where you upload audio files. Anchor.fm is actually a platform where you can distribute podcasts if you're interested in that, and it is free. And I have, again, an MP3 file on your website. And so your website can be actually a place where you store a lot of these tools where people are already going, which is kind of nice, that teachers or families or your audiences are already going to your website to look for your programs. And if you have resources that already exist that are there, that makes it a lot easier for them than to jump from platform to platform, because if they go to YouTube and type in, Alaska story time or whatever, they're going to get a lot of different results, but they already trust you as an institution. And so to kind of ease where they're looking, then it makes it easier for them, and again increases your access and your engagement with them. The cost of your time really varies. Some of these assets, especially sound effects or maybe interviews or oral histories, you may already have in your collection that you can then kind of unearth and bring back to life. And I think in terms of creating new audio, it's kind of similar to video in that your time commitment can vary depending on what you want and how you structure it. When you're planning this kind of thing, when you start again with why and what goals you wanted to support, you can then kind of help you determine what kind of work you want to put into it. If you're looking to record sound effects, if you're, let's say, a science museum or natural history museum and you want to get sound effects, that might be one kind of time involvement. If you're looking to collect oral histories from your community, that's another type of time involvement. So with a lot of tools, I guess maybe it's obvious to say that the cost of the time varies, but it's helpful maybe to know up front in terms of thinking about who's responsible for this project. This is getting really big. There's a big learning curve. How am I going to edit it? There's ways to make it more manageable though, if you want to do it. If you feel like creating audio pieces is one of the best ways you can support your learning goals and engage audiences, taking your phone that has a really great voice recorder app and going outside and recording it, getting the kind of sound you want, that could be great. I think when it comes to trends that have changed, I think I'll say that quality is really important, but if it's pretty good, I think people are pretty used to obviously even just seeing people in their kitchen presenting a workshop. And so if the audio is good and they can hear it and it illustrates the idea that you're trying to prove, then the quality doesn't have to be film crew quality. It can be pretty good. And that's going to be enough to demonstrate, especially when it's packaged with everything else. Some examples, and I can send out after the workshop, I can send all the example links to Dixie to kind of demonstrate so you can go look and see these kind of illustrated examples. But the Adirondack Experience Museum has a really excellent educational podcast that they package with lesson plans and discussion questions, and it's run by it's run out of the museum education department, or I don't know why I said museum, but their education department. And they basically, it's like NPR style, like with sound effects and curator interviews, and it's a really fun way to engage school audiences. The Bullock Texas State History Museum, they won a Muse Award last year for one of their podcasts where they just highlighted one object and did a series of podcasts about that one object. And I'm sure also many of you are familiar with oral histories. There's just so many ways. And I think it's starting with, why do I want to do this? And like, what are the goals of my program? Collaborative tools. These I feel like are really used before and during the virtual experience. So you can use it as we're using it to brainstorm together, to synthesize ideas, to reflect. You can collect questions or observations beforehand, especially if you're doing a virtual experience. If you did a Jamboard, let's say, with a bunch of students about an object and you collected all their questions ahead of time, in terms of thinking about relevance from that perspective, now you're going into a virtual field trip, or you're going into a family story time, or with general audience, really any audience, you say, I saw that a lot of people were interested in X. So I'm going to definitely address that today in our presentation. Or I saw that you're really interested in Y. Let me just get ahead of that right now. Let's talk about it before we even start. And so knowing where your audience is coming in from, these collaborative tools ahead of time or even during can give you a temperature of what they're interested in. And then you're able to kind of, even if you've got your structured program, adapt it so that it's a little bit more relevant to the people that are coming and what they're interested in knowing. I want to show you two other ones. We use Jamboard today. I want to just show two other ones. One is called Flipgrid and one is called Padlet. Let me go here. So the National World War II Museum in Louisiana uses Flipgrid. Flipgrid is basically a great way. People post videos to each other and then you can comment on it. And so, for example, they have an Ask a Museum Educator. They posted a prompt. And this is what they use before their field trips. Students could then post their response here. And there's a lot of settings on the back end of this, by the way, that you can control in terms of like, who's seeing who, and can you allow people to comment or not? But this was a way that the museum could gather comments and feedback from students ahead of the field trip. But it's basically a video-based platform where you're uploading content. I also know that the Met in New York is on here, and they have kind of asynchronous, like kind of just lesson plans on here, because a lot of teachers come here to get source material and ideas. And the Met has posted like a picture, a video, and a link back to their lesson plan. So this is a big site where teachers congregate. So in terms of using a platform where people are going, Flipgrid is one that a lot of teachers are going to get access to for resources. And it can be something, it can be a place where you're putting out content and engaging with your audiences beforehand. I also want to show you Padlet is another collaborative tool. It kind of works similar to what we did in terms of a Post-it note, kind of, and you can structure this in different ways. This is a focus group I did the other night, but you can structure this in a timeline. You can structure this as like almost like a Pinterest board. I created this in like these columns of like what, if maybe some of you are familiar with the KWL chart of what I know this, I want to know something, and I learn something. So I know something K, I want to know W, and I learn. So KWL chart. And this is another great way, I think, when it comes to digital interaction. We've all been, even in-person interaction or digital, there's people who will easily raise their hand and people who will sit back and maybe they want a quieter way to interact and engage. And so a Padlet style where you can basically add a comment here. I'm just going to do test. You publish it. People can add it, and it's anonymous too. Same like Jamboard in many ways. It's an anonymous way to post your comments and post your thoughts. You can also then allow comments or likes to happen here, but it's another collaborative, brainstorming, developing ideas platform that is free. I think you can have up to like 8 boards for free. And then I think Flipgrid is also free, and maybe there's some pricing options with it. But those are 2 kind of collaborative boards or collaborative platforms that are really easy for users to use. If we go back here, let me just go back here. In terms of your time, it's very low. It took me very little time to create a Jamboard. I just had to know, again, what I wanted to do with it. So I had to start with why. What do I want this to accomplish? I want it to be an opportunity to bring together this community, share ideas, bounce ideas off of each other, generate ideas and themes, learn from each other. And so when I figure out why I wanted to do something or what was the goal of the program, then I wanted to create something collaborative that brought everyone into the conversation. And it was very easy to make, and it was free. And in Miro and Nearpod there is some cost associated with that, but that's a good one too. It kind of combines a lot of these different collaborative opportunities here, or under one platform. But collaborative tools they're great, and they kind of get to that interaction piece that we talked about why we use these. And they're fun too. I hope you all had fun using Jamboard, but I think it's just a fun way to kind of break up the. Yes, Nearpod has fun games too. Yeah, I like, because as you're seeing this now, like to go to Jamboard, we're having to go off and then come back to Zoom, and then, with Nearpod, you are all in one platform, and you can do polls and games and sticky note boards and everything in one, which is just kind of nice. Yeah. I'm just reading through the chat, just getting caught up there before I keep going. Digital helps us open doors. 100%. I think, maybe not outside museums, but I've made like decisions about restaurants based on what their website looks like. And so like if they're in thinking about digital, the website being like your virtual door, and what are resources and what are the opportunities that are available and easily findable on your website, let's say, if that's the first place that people go, to see that, and we're going to get to best practices in a minute, but there's the ways that you can package digital tools together to support that deeper engagement, to say, I didn't know that they had that object or that collection. That's huge. That's really huge. And to that point, I think people miss the opportunity to highlight their own museum in a virtual experience. There might be places in a museum that you can't take visitors in large groups. When you think about digital in the virtual door that it enables, it can take you to a lot of places. It can take visitors to places they can't see. Object storage, conservation, even just the people that work at the museum. I think that in showing off your museum, you can also show off the campus and the people that are there that make it run and work. People are always really curious just about how museums even operate. How do you make the choices that you make when selecting an exhibition or an object? And so I think it's a really neat opportunity to leverage that, because you're digital, because you're not worried about the number of people in your space. It's a virtual space, and therefore can hold so much more. And just when you think about what platform should I use, it's thinking about just leveraging the one that you already have, that's right there. And there's no cost to you because you work at that museum. And so you can just ask your conservator, do you mind if I just pop in for an hour? And maybe it's blending these tools together, which often happens, right? These tools don't live in silos. You can use a video when you're highlighting the collection or your aspects of your museum. But I think it's really exciting to show, I think that came up too, is like you get to show layers to your museum that you can't always show in a physical experience. My example here is the Shed Aquarium. They have a kind of behind the scenes, basically virtual field trip that takes people behind the scenes to see their veterinarians or their workers feeding the animals, and people just love that. And that can be true. It doesn't have to, you don't have to have live animals just to get people to want to see the behind the scenes. Having worked in an art museum, there's no live animals, and people still wanted to see behind the scenes. So let's jump over here. Yes, I think I'm looking at Melissa's comment, and I think how you use this is totally up to you, and whether or not you use any of these tools. But this is what's out. These are some ideas of what's out there and how visitors are interacting with museums, and to find new ways to engage supports that idea of relevance that came up in that first Jamboard. Which brings us to our second Jamboard. In thinking about these tools, we're going to break back out into groups, and I'm doing it randomly. And so therefore you might end up in a different group of people, but we're just going to do the same thing where whatever group number you're in, you will go to that Jamboard link. And to do that, regardless what group you were in before, whenever group you're in, you're going to go to the next frame. And you'll see there's a little button up here. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to, based on what we talked about, what you already know about these different tools, what are some strengths and limitations to these tools that are helpful in thinking about when you're selecting which tool you want to use. So I'm going to drop the links back in the chat since there's been some good chatter along the way. Go here. I will pop around again. So I'm going to drop it in the chat now and when you're in the breakout groups. Let me stop my sharing, and we'll give about another 10-ish minutes to do this and then come back and reflect together. Welcome back, everybody. It was really great to see, again, another kind of population of these ideas around what works and what doesn't with these different tools. I think that's maybe something else to know about tools, is that there's a silver bullet. One tool won't achieve everything you want it to do. One platform won't. But knowing, again, what you want to do and why you want to use it will help you pick the best tool for the job. And that you can use them in concert with each other, as I mentioned earlier. You can, have, like with Flipgrid or even with Jamboard, not Jamboard, but you could, play a video for some, have them watch a video and then respond on the Jamboard or something like that. So you can use these in concert with each other, but there are limitations to all of them for different reasons, as you identified. So it's helpful to also know going into it that when you use digital, it's not going to solve all your problems, but it can solve, if you've identified the single problem that you want to solve for, you can then find the tool that best helps to resolve it. Across the Jamboards, and I'll share my screen again so that we can look at them together. I think for, especially for audio and video, probably the biggest limitation was internet access in remote areas, and how do communities that don't have that internet access reach that content. I think one way that I've seen this on a little bit is collaborating with partners that are in those communities, let's say it's libraries or schools, and trying to at least educate those partners of the resources that you have, so that when wherever people are going, where your audiences are going to access the internet, if it's not in their homes, who's out there, where are they going, and then how do you reach those partners so that you can then reach those communities that you're trying to get to. I think having conversations with your audiences is an important part of selecting the tools that you want to use. It doesn't have to be the only decision point that you use to make your own decision, but it can be helpful to see where they're going. I think with audio and video, in terms of their strengths, that they're very accessible in terms of people are familiar with them. They're very popular. Especially with audio, they can allow a different type of kind of sensory experience when you're just listening to something. Maybe a lot of you listen to podcasts. It's a different type of experience to just listen and not have to watch something especially as we've identified earlier. Zoom fatigue is real. Watching videos that can be straining on your eyes. And so providing an opportunity just to listen while, let's say, looking at your window can be really nice, and also accessible for people, as someone said here, useful for low vision, so they're still able to access the content. And that came up across all the boards. I think when it also came to limitations for audio and video is getting around the there's the museum piece. One is the brand and style of the museum, and that's an important piece. They want to brand the content that they're creating, and that doesn't allow for kind of quick and dirty audio or quick and dirty video. That can be a little trickier to get around. But maybe it's an opportunity to, if they know that you want to do something, how can that be a place to start conversations with people to say, I want to do this video, basically, where can I start? And it can be an opportunity to work within your museum and see what's available. And what are the standards that they're really tied to, and what are the ones that they say are, okay, we don't have to have this piece to it. So it allows some flexibility on your end. When it comes to editing video and audio, there is definitely, as we mentioned earlier, learning curve. When it comes to editing video and editing audio, and the time that it takes to do those things can be, when we looked at the types of tools and the cost of your time, that's where it really varies. And so that is definitely a limitation and an understandable one. And depending on, again, what you want the video to do, I'll send out the link to this National Portrait Gallery when we're done. But that's a video of a woman in her, it looks like just in her, somewhere in her house, kind of holding up a picture, like a photograph, or a printed out picture of a photograph from her museum. So it can vary, I think, but it does, you don't want to go too astray of your museum, and you want to be true to what they want to put out there. So I think when it comes to looking at collaboration, the collaboration piece, I think people found that it was really an opportunity to connect to more people, to work with different types of learners or different types of people, how different people engage with interactive content. Especially anonymity can be nice. You can just type in and you're participating in a way that's comfortable. There weren't, it can be overdone. Maybe that's a reflection on this presentation. We're doing a lot of Jamboard. I think, right, with any new tool, it's not only learning, this is audience comfort with technology. There is a comfort level for you to learn how to use it, but then to make sure that your audience is comfortable with using it. And we will get into that a little bit when we kind of go through best practices of what is your audience already familiar in using, and that can help determine what platform that you use. And I think when it comes to the collection and museum, that it allows that deeper exploration that we've touched on so far, that it can show you new pieces of the museum that you didn't know, that they didn't know existed, and have these aha moments with your visitors. And I think the collection museum, these pieces can be, I see screen fatigue on here. It could also be an asynchronous experience where you get to, it's a 5-minute behind the scenes with your conservator and how they, fix a fur coat that you have in your collection. Or so it can be, that's kind of on your audience's time as well. So really good. Oops, I jumped ahead. I'm sorry. Don't look at that. Now we're going to go over here. Thinking about strengths and limitations, there's also an element of best practices when we think about how do we approach, and often questions come up, especially with video audio, is like, how long should it be? And so the best practices around video and audio too, is it can elevate museums and or community voices. It really is a great opportunity to bring your community into the programs that you're developing, especially if you're trying to reach specific communities or diverse communities or new audiences. Seeing themselves reflected in the program itself, they then become ambassadors for your programs. It becomes a great mutually beneficial relationship where you're learning more about them and they're helping you create more relevant programs for that community that you're trying to reach. You want to keep videos short. People don't, especially with schools, if you want it to be part of like a pre-visit or a post-visit, keeping it short is really important, because then a teacher can drop in the video, and then you provided some class discussion questions or an activity around it. And so that allows the user to easily access and want to click on it. It's hard to want to click on a really long video and expect people to maintain that attention. I say for students, most other families and general audiences have access to YouTube. I just know some schools block YouTube, so you want to think about what platform students are using. But in terms of accessibility, I know this has come up a lot and forgot to mention it earlier, kind of looking at each platform. A lot of these platforms, what's nice about using what's already out there is that they are often, especially big ones like Flipgrid is owned by Microsoft, right? Or like Padlet or Zoom, or within Zoom, right? There's polls, there's ways to do interactivity. There's accessibility features that they have built in. And so you can leverage those. And so you don't feel like you have to start from scratch in that way. But if you pick a platform, you can check its accessibility features to make sure that it's, what does it do for people who are low vision or hard of hearing? How can they access that same content? I think when it comes to video and especially audio, providing a transcript of whatever you're creating is a great way to make sure that you create content that's accessible in multiple different ways. With audio, I think you can go a little longer. I think people's just attention span for audio is different than it is with video. My kind of rule of thumb is to align the length to the grade level. So for elementary, and also this has also been run through with some teacher focus groups that I've done, like 3 to 5 minutes of audio for elementary is good, 6 to 8 minutes for middle, and 9 to 12 for high school. And I would say high school / adult. I think when we're maybe longer with the podcast, you can do 20, 30 minutes for a podcast. But in terms of asking school audiences to listen to programs or to listen to audio, those are about the lengths and understanding how much they can, and they could do more. I know we all have kids that might listen to longer podcasts, but if you want to tie it to a question or an activity, keeping it a little shorter and into these digestible chunks is really helpful to make it accessible for the audience. We've mentioned this before, but to align it with other museum resources so that when they click on that audio link, they're not just getting the audio, but you maybe have paired, and you don't have to do all of this, right? It can feel overwhelming to like, well, if I pick audio, do I have to then combine everything? But if you just give them an audio link and maybe a link to a lesson plan, you're providing this easy way for them to get a little deeper into your collection. If you have an audio or video link with some discussion questions for the teacher, it can be 2 questions. It doesn't have to be 8. You know, again, you're making it easy for the user to want to learn more. And that's goal for these tools is to allow that deeper engagement. When it comes to best practices, to kind of just across the board, I would start small. We've talked about a lot of them, and I think there was a comment earlier that said it's just good to know this stuff sometimes. That's right. You don't have to do video and audio and collaborative. If you just like the idea of creating some form of collaborative board and it's easy on your time and it's free to do, great. If you want to go and interview the head of each of your museum departments, if you have multiple departments, and do a 5-minute iPhone, or Android video on your phone and post it, great. It's okay to start small, and it's a great place to start because then you can break down these bigger feelings into smaller steps, and then it becomes more actionable, and then you can feel like you're making progress. Other things would be to identify platforms that your museum is already using. That's also what I meant earlier by you're not starting from zero. If you have an Instagram account and you want to do an Instagram live about behind the scenes that you can then use later, record and use for later, that's a platform that your museum is already using. If you have a videographer that your marketing department may use, that maybe they have a little extra budget that they can share with you, I think there's ways to use this as an opportunity to see what's already happening in your museum and what platforms are using and piggyback off of that. Or in reverse, if you want to invest in a platform, you can maybe talk to other departments and say, would you want to cost share this with me if we do videos so that I get 2 videos, you get 2 videos, or I'm going to invest in Flipgrid. Would you want to use it in some way? So it's an opportunity to have discussion in both ways and maybe potentially cost or also the cost of a platform if you're interested in using it. Identifying platforms that your audience is already using focus groups or surveys or ways to kind of gauge, schools are already using Google Meet, for example. If I'm going to do a virtual field trip, I'll just meet them. I don't need to then maybe build out a whole WebEx platform, or they're already using, and schools are already really comfortable with Miro or Nearpod or what other platforms, I'll just use that because I know that I won't have to teach students another platform. And that's something I've also heard a lot, that schools don't want to have to teach their students, and maybe audiences are feeling this too, a new platform every time they go somewhere new. They know that. And so I think understanding what your audiences are already using can be a great way to help you make your decision and justify it to your board or your supervisor or your director to say why we need to invest in X as opposed to Y, because that's where our audiences already are, and we're gonna reach more faster if we do that. As I mentioned earlier, identifying pre-existing content that you may already have. What are some videos that are in your exhibitions that you can then get that file and cut it up and put it on social, or give it or make it a pre-visit activity? Or that's another way in terms of backing away from like learning how to video edit, is what videos do you already have? Backing away from audio editing, what oral histories do you already have? And I think by packaging content, this is the last bullet point, and offering opportunities for deeper engagement with your collection, that's been a big theme coming up again and again. But it does allow you to do that, because when they come in that virtual door, or let's say they walk, let's take that analogy a little further, and they walk into your virtual room, they're walking into a room and they can see a link, a video, a resource, a this, a that, and then they can kind of say, oh, I didn't know I wanted to learn about, oh, and I want to know more about the artist. Oh, now this is taking me to his collection page, and I didn't know that that artist made these types of things too. And so the more, because it's digital, you can hyperlink and connect and package them together in a way that allows those opportunities for engagement. It's the last Jamboard, I promise. But I think this is like thinking about your audiences, and that we kind of addressed it a little bit, but what are some of the considerations you have to keep in mind depending on the tool that you're using? And so in one final interaction, or one final Jamboard, we're going to think about, and you can maybe what you can do, because I'm not going to be able to break you up into which audience you're using, which one you're trying to target, but you could put your audience first. So if you're thinking about families, start your sticky note out with families, and then say, young kids are not likely to sit and listen to a podcast. Let's say that's a consideration to make. I'm just going to drop that in here for one. So just make sure that you put your audience at the beginning, and then we can group it by audience. And this is an opportunity, if different people here are working with the same audience, they can kind of share that knowledge about different ways to think about how to engage their audiences online. So it seems like the chat does not follow the breakout room. So I'm going to break you out into rooms first. There's been maybe some issues with that. So I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to break you into rooms and then send the links. Welcome back, everybody. Great posting as usual, and as always so far today on the Jamboards. I'm going to share the screen again and go over just some emerging ideas and trends as it comes to thinking about audiences. When it comes to, I'm kind of taking notes here, when it comes to older audiences, especially thinking about their comfort with technology, and maybe also for younger too, their ability to type. What's their typing, and what expectation do you have? What role does typing into a chat play in your engagement with them, and what is their ability to do that? When it comes to school level audiences, there was discussion of just readability and making sure that if you're asking them to read something and then give you feedback, and if you're facilitating it, what's that opportunity, what's their not opportunity but ability to follow along. And that's actually a good place in terms of if you're talking live with someone, or even if it's pre-recorded, to use visual language that can address people who maybe can't follow along if there's something being read, but also by using visual language seamlessly in your discussion, you're addressing some accessibility needs of kind of giving some audio description to what you're looking at as a group, to those who maybe have low vision. And then there was a lot of things that apply, I think, there was some family specific ones about, do parents want more screen time, providing opportunities for engagement between generations, or between, a person and their caregiver. And I think with break from screen time, again, especially with asynchronous platforms, it can be, when we think about grouping a video with an activity, that they may see that video and they don't want to watch it, but you're giving them an activity or a craft or a book to read or something to do elsewhere. And so when you package it, it does give them like this menu of options. And so it says you could do screen time, but if you're a family and you're like, we've already done screen time, we want to do just the activity, it is nice to provide that break. Again, for a lot of people, I saw someone suggested movement. In group one, there's someone writing down a lot of very specific kind of ways to construct different tools to maximize their impact. So in terms of, writing a blog, consider a voice recording, and then or having a transcript of your audio to then use in multiple ways. When it came to just more general audiences or maybe just general considerations, and again, when I will share these links to the Jamboards later, language fluency was a big one too. So thinking about when you think about accessibility for your audiences, what are the not only maybe what are the tech barriers, but what are the language barriers that might limit, and then how do you address those in your planning? Access to the internet was huge. How do you create digital resources that can be addressed? Partners is one way that I've seen it done, but that came up a lot of providing. Do you turn more to analog? Is it again? Is it maybe partnering with community organizations that reach those communities? There's a question about what devices they're using and making sure that the platforms that you're using are compatible to an iPad or a tablet or like those are the same thing. Sorry, a tablet or a phone or a laptop. So no matter where that it is accessible and usable on each. We even had a little bit of an issue today on Zoom with someone having multiple maybe tabs open on the tablet, and it was getting a little confusing. And so and understanding maybe where your audience is accessing that information and how that would impact their experience of using it. Considerations with this also is thinking about when you create something, it's allowing multiple styles of learning to happen, but also designing the program to do that as well. And so I think these are all really great considerations to keep in mind. And I think it's helpful to hear from across the panel or across the group what people have in mind when they're thinking about this. I think screen time right now is really big, obviously, with families. And again, by providing, even if you're engaging digital, but providing analog opportunities to move their bodies, to go do a scavenger hunt around their house. If they're on the screen, it doesn't mean if they have to stay there. And so if the screen or the digital piece is the access point, you can give them opportunities to do other things. Then you become this a trusted resource and a reliable resource for your audiences to say, I really like the kind of activities they have me do with my kid or my parent or anything like that. Is there anything before we kind of begin to wrap up? Anyone want to add or reflect on in this and kind of thinking about audiences and starting to tie it all together? That's okay. I want to kind of do a quick maybe poll in the chat and see, based on what we did today. We talked about why we use tools. We talked about the strengths and limitations of these different tools of video, audio, collaborative. This is an overview of kind of the big ones, collaborative tools, your collection and museum. You can just type in the chat, which one are you most interested in using at this point? I guess I'm looking at the Zoom chat and the Whova chat. Let me just go back and forth. Video and audio, definitely multi-purpose. You can use it in a lot of different ways. Nearpod is pretty great. I've been on the like participant end of it and also creating in it, and it's nice. It's kind of under one roof. Audio, video. Never ending. I'm gonna go check in the chat over here and see if I'm missing anybody. I think most people are in the Zoom chat. Okay, so something maybe audio, a little bit of video, maybe Flipgrid coming up a couple times as a way to, and that is a platform that a lot of schools are using. So in terms of if you're wanting to reach schools, that's a place that students are pretty familiar with. My last kind of question to you that you don't have to share or you can is, when you leave today, there was a lot of information. We all had a lot of screen time just now, but before we just open it up to Q&A, I want to just give you a minute to write down like your action step. If you want to use Nearpod, if you want to do audio or video or Flipgrid, what's the first thing that you're going to do to move in that direction? So I see Desiree saying work with partners, a staff of one, 100%. Finding who that partner is that could help you create or create the digital piece or platform that you want to create, or the piece of content that you want to create. Partners are huge in reaching new audiences and finding your community. Yeah, learning how to use it, maybe getting over some of those learning curves we talked about earlier first. So talking to your audience, having that first conversation be with your audience to say, okay, we're thinking of using these 3 tools. You don't have to make that question completely open-ended. You can say, we're thinking of using these 3 tools. Which one are you most familiar with? Or which one do you use? Or you can always offer the other as an option, but it can help you gauge where people are at. That's great. Yeah, figuring out what you want to share. What do you want them to learn? And then what platform best supports that? Those are all great action steps. Maybe they're coming. Okay. I want to just leave this here as a thank you. You have my email. If you have any follow-up questions about using digital tools, which tools to use, how to reach out to your audiences, how to bring them into the conversation, that's my email and that's my website. And a lot of the conversations that we had today relating to technology come out of I have a free workbook called the Distance Learning Workbook. It kind of goes through the 4 foundational components of building an online learning program. One of them is there's a piece about technology and kind of a pros and cons of different types of distance learning. I'll drop that link in the chat, but I want to just share that. Feel free to reach out to me after. But without further ado, there's about 10 minutes left for Q&A. And what are you still wondering? I'm going to stop the share and just go back to gallery view for that. And I will drop in. And I'll use the Huva had some questions that came in.
Looks like Melissa has a question. You raised your hand.
Great. Yes, Melissa.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi. Yes.
Thank you for all of this information. I have a question about sort of if you have any suggestions about the evaluation piece. I feel like we often spew a lot of things out, and it's really hard, especially in the asynchronous world, to understand if people are accessing it or how it's being received. And we've used Google Analytics a little bit, but it seems like that's maybe not a full picture, because a lot of people within our museum are the ones that are actually accessing the things, which is not really our target audience. So I'm just curious if you can touch on that at all.
Yeah, and that's one of the questions in Huva too, is thinking about, how do you track visitors who even log into a virtual tour or things like that? So tracking who's coming and how they're engaging with it. I think one way is by, let's say, well, in your website, so often that times there's ways to collect analytics. It depends on what you want to do with the information that you want to get. So if you just want to see numbers of clicks, to your point, it doesn't maybe account for the people in your own museum that are doing that, but oftentimes you if it's on a website, you can collect that information. When it comes to resources, you could also ask people to give you their email before they get the resource that you're asking for. That can be one way, so you can see. And then what's nice about that is then you can gauge, you can reach back out to them and do like a quick survey to them of like how likely, I think a net promoter score has been found to be like one of the most effective ways to gauge if people were satisfied, and without giving them too many questions, is like, would you recommend this to your friend or family? And if it's a yes, one survey for them, and it gives you the sense that they were satisfied with it, they liked it enough to want to recommend it to other people. So that's if you're just looking for like use and tracking. And especially when it comes to address maybe the question in Whova about tracking virtual programs. Usually people I've seen, especially with Zoom or other, if you register in advance. And so again, when you get their emails, that's a great opportunity to follow up with them with a question, or invite them. Let's say if you're doing some kind of bigger focus group, if you can collect a piece of information somewhere along the way, then you can follow up with them and ask some more questions of them, whether they like the program itself, or maybe you now have collected a list of 100 people who have downloaded your family lesson plan. Then you can follow up with them and maybe ask them to be part of a family focus group for future digital programs or resources or assets that you're creating. So that's, I guess, it's less maybe evaluating the program itself, but it sounds like, if I'm interpreting your question correctly, how do you get a sense of who's coming to these digital programs? Am I interpreting your question correctly? Or
yeah, just gathering information in general, not only like the audience, but how it's being used and if it's meeting those folks' needs. So those are all good suggestions you just shared.
And I think that if it's meeting people's needs, I think that's like kind of another level of questioning. I think there's are people using it? And that's one kind of data set. And then there can be is it meeting their needs? You could almost, I think if you have a bank of, let's say, emails from previous programs, you could pull in that group. Let's say, if I'm just using families as an example, and say, we've created these materials, we need some feedback on them. Can you test these out? Get a group of people to test them out and prototype them for you, and then have a discussion. So that could be another way, is that even if they haven't specifically up to that point maybe experience like a story time and then a family craft. If you structure it, you could then kind of mimic that with a new group of people and see if it's meeting their needs. I feel like it helps to maybe break down the question and think like, oh, I may already have a lot of those emails, and I can just bring them back and ask them if this is still meeting their needs, because that might still be the audience that you're trying to reach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Another question on Whova was, how do you create a post that works for a variety of platforms, Facebook, Instagram, et cetera, that does not take up all staff time to create? I do believe in being able to repurpose content. So if you create a video for a virtual field trip as a pre-visit, let's say it's 5 minutes, if you can cut that down and get a 1-minute soundbite that you can post on Facebook or Instagram, I think as much as you can create one piece of content, but find multiple ways to use it, that might be a way to, if you're the one person in your museum, you're producing a video, and maybe there's money to invest in it, but you can also justify the cost of it by saying it's going to be used not just on one platform, but on 5 platforms. That can also help justify maybe why you need to maybe invest in like a video crew and an editor, because you're going to be using it in multiple ways. And it helps you just think about one video that you're making and how it can be used in different ways. So that would be, that maybe doesn't get away from it, does not take up all staff time to create. But if you think small and you just want to create one video, let's say to start, or 2 episodes of a podcast. I mean, a podcast series can be as many or little as you want, right? There's no there's like some general best practices, but you can make a 3-part series of a podcast and call it a day. It doesn't take up too much time, and you can use it in a lot of different ways. So I think, podcasts aren't as visual for Facebook and Instagram, but I think as much as you can think about repurposing, that would be maybe helpful.
Yeah, I wanted to say we had a local business in where I last lived, and they did a podcast, but they always videoed it. So the video would be on Facebook, and then they would take that audio and make it a podcast too. So it'd be a Facebook Live video, but then it would be a audio later.
Yes. I'm looking at Hoover. There's also another question about where should limited staff focus their time and efforts to get maximum return on digital engagement. I think every museum is different. And so where your audience is could determine which platform you use to get that maximum engagement. If you have 4 Instagram followers and a huge following on TikTok, then focus more on TikTok. I think it depends on where you've already built that audience so that you're not having to start from scratch just because it's a platform. Again, going back to the beginning, thinking about why you're doing it and not just using it because someone said and people think you should. But if you already have built an audience somewhere, to keep leveraging and building that relationship on that platform. Other questions? I'm happy to stay on for a few minutes. How to build that audience. Kat, can you clarify your question? When you say to build an audience to do this, what do you mean by the word this?
I'm just going to chime in. What I mean is, if you don't have a lot of people on Instagram or Facebook or whichever, how can you try to build on one particular one over another?
Well, I think picking a platform is helpful, and then I think consistency is probably the key. Is that you're just posting every week, or you just build some sort of consistency for yourself. It could be daily, it could be weekly, so that whoever is following, and if you can use, yes, I think I also see Melissa typing in and start with your email list and invite them to where you're going to share, so that you say, we're going to really be building and adding more content to our Instagram feed or our Facebook page. So please meet us over there. We're going to be having exclusive interviews, and you can make it sound really fun and inviting. We're going to be posting lesson plans. We're going to be posting our upcoming events and programs. So I think if to start thinking about, again, starting small, don't feel like you have to be on every platform. But to pick one and build that consistency and build that audience. And again, thinking about that you're not starting from zero. If you have some form of email list, as Melissa said, you can bring your audience to where you're going. You can share with them and be transparent about the ideas that you're in, the platforms that you're starting to build on, so that they know that you have a presence there.
I was wondering if I could chime in there too.
Yeah, absolutely.
When I used to present at conferences, I was always present on YouTube. So something I would always talk about is YouTube has its own culture. There are people who are influencers on YouTube, on Instagram, on TikTok. You can follow them, maybe find educational channels that have a lot of followers and follow those channels to see what they're doing and how they're building that audience and how they're interacting with their audience. And as you start to understand kind of the community of that platform, you really have to think about creating content that fits that platform, because every platform is different. Vimeo has a different community than YouTube. TikTok has a different community than Facebook. So whatever platform you're choosing, you really have to understand that platform. And to do that, you're really going to have to follow people and just watch, pay attention, and see what they do and how they interact and how they have built that following.
And then Emily, I posted what one of our museums here in Alaska did for a podcast. It was based on a story,
Oh, great.
and it was only a few sections. So I posted that in the chat if anyone wanted to see it.
Oh, thanks so much. I just clicked on it. I have it on a tab. I'm going to listen to it later. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you, Melissa, for joining. Other Melissa, I know it's coming on to 1 minute till 11 o'clock there. I'm getting that time right. So thank you all for joining, and feel free to email me with any follow-up questions that you might have.